Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode in the series Dawah Ilallah, as we go through the comparative sciences in a way to make our dawah more effective in calling people to submit to Allah. The dawah that we are doing is very specific. How to help people come to understand who Allah is. Dawah is just calling. So it's specific. We want people to submit to Allah, want them to understand what Islam really teaches, and to break some of the misconceptions or ideas that people might have. We are talking in a very practical way on how to deal with issues. Remember, we've said many times before that Islam is a common sense religion. So Islam is a very common sense belief system. Makes sense for everybody, even for the aliens. Sometimes people put more faith in aliens than they do in Allah. Very dangerous world we live in. People are talking about Area 51, whatever it is, keeping aliens hidden there. People are seeing spaceships all the time and saying, well, no, spaceships came down and aliens came and abducted me and took me to their spaceship. Have you noticed that most of these people who talk about alien abductions are pagans? They're not Christians, they're not Jews, they're not Muslims. It seems like only the pagans ever get abducted. I'd like to hear about a Muslim abductee. Maybe they don't abduct monotheists. Maybe they only abduct people who already believe in the occult, the hidden. Remember, occult means to hide behind your back. So this is not the topic for today, by the way. But it's interesting when we think about people who believe in alien abductions, believe in little green men and spaceships, believe that they came all the way from these other planets just to put us under tests and microscopes, that people believe this. Maybe this is to prepare people for the idea, for what's going to actually take place when the Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, comes back. So it prepares the minds of the people for believing in lies. So that when the Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, comes back and he says to the people, did I ever tell you to worship me as a God? People won't believe him. And maybe it's a way of confusing people with all these ideas of space aliens and spaceships and all this other nonsense. But people believe this. People have dedicated millions of dollars to researching this. But people haven't spent that same amount of time, money, or energy, or website creation, or book printing in investigating Islam. So it is your job to teach them about this very, very important teaching, Islam, how to submit to Allah. Many times when you're doing dawah, people will say that Islam is barbaric. You guys are crazy. I mean, look how you deal with people who commit adultery. I mean, you guys are crazy. You're going to kill and stone people. You take them to soccer fields and you string them up on soccer posts and you hang them. Isn't this what we hear? You're barbaric. Look at the way you treat anybody who steals. Cut their hands off and let them wander around the street. You whip people and beat them with sticks. Forget these things. We've heard how barbaric Islam is supposed to be. In a couple of episodes I spoke about racism. And I spoke how that we have to be careful that racism doesn't find its way back into society again, because it's on its way back in. Because we are turning our blind eye to what is actually going on. We're not looking at what's happening. We're not aware of what's happening. In the same way, when we hear people say that Islam is barbaric because of all the things that I just mentioned, we never hear them say, Britain is barbaric, America is barbaric, China is barbaric, Pakistan and India is barbaric, Taiwan is barbaric, whatever country you want to say, because they have a prison system where people are caught for a crime and spend 10 years or 20 years or 15 years in jail. Don't say that's barbaric. That's humane. What happens to a person who commits a rape and then the just system sends them to jail for a year, if it's not a suspended sentence. And then the second time they do it, they send them for maybe a year and a half or 2 years, if that. And if they do it a third time, they go to jail again and again and again. They call them repeat offenders, specifically sexual repeat offenders. And what's the best that the world can offer you if they molest your children? They will put them on the internet so that if you want to look for them, you might find them. That the sexual offender has to register with the local state police station that he's a sexual offender. That's the best they can offer. That's the best security they're going to give you, is that if you happen to know how to do it, which very, very few people know, you can go to a website and figure out what house they live in. And then you know they're there, you can do nothing to them. You cannot go to them and knock on their door and say, "Dear Mr. Offender, do not come near my children," because then he can sue you. And then you'll land up in jail because of this lovely non-barbaric system that we have in society today. But people will say that Islam was barbaric. By the way, we don't chop people's hands off, and we don't stone women to death for committing adultery, and we don't lynch people. This is not our practice. We have something called a legal system that works. Our legal system is actually a working legal system. The Islamic legal system is one that has checks and balances in place. In other words, it's not corruptible. It's not dependent on what the rules or laws have changed for that year or that month or in that state. In some states, you'll get 2 years. In another state, you'll get 50 years for the same crime in different parts of different countries. I'm not only talking about American states. I'm talking about, you're not the only people with the word state, by the way. Many countries use that word. Some provinces, some areas, the rules will be different. In some countries, if you are found with marijuana, you will go to jail for 20 years. In another country, they write you out a fine, and they say, "Don't do it again." See, different rules, because these are human rules. They depend on the climate of the day, depend on the politics of the day, depends who wants to stand for elections, what their policy might be, on what the rules will be. So you can be a 16-year-old boy and go to jail for the rest of your life because you did something out of ignorance, something out of your testosterone levels, maybe you were intoxicated and you committed a manslaughter or killed somebody. You go to jail for the rest of your life, even though you're 16 years old. That is humane. That won't happen in Islam. In Islam, we have a divine law, not a human law. It's called Sharia, thing that you are so scared of. It just means law, and it just is law. And it's just a way for you to live in a safer and a better environment for you and for your children, and for the whole community, whether you're Muslim or not, because it protects both Muslims and non-Muslims. And this is the beauty of Islam, is that Islam is not a religion only for Muslims. It's a religion for the whole of humanity, if you realize it or not. Because it protects your rights as a Jew. It protects your rights as a Christian. Christianity doesn't do that for Islam and Judaism. Judaism does not do that for Christianity and Islam. It's because it is a divine law. It's not a law written by man. Some clever man thinking up some clever ideas. This is divine. This is the way the Creator thinks. He wants every human being to be protected. If you choose to believe Him or not, whether you choose to submit to Him or not, He still wants the best for you. Can you imagine? In Christianity, what's the message? If you don't accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior, you're going to burn and you have no rights and you're going to go to hell. There's no hope. In Islam, Allah still protects you. He still wants you to come to the knowledge on your own, without forcing you. There's no force. You don't have to. It's your choice. We just need to present the truth to the people, and they must make that decision for themselves. We don't scare them into Islam. We allow them to choose Islam. Many people will say that Islam was spread by the sword. Heard this? That ties to the same thing as Islam being barbaric. Well, let's have a look at world religions today. Every religion in the world was spread by violence, was spread by terrorism, was spread by anger and killing. Islam wasn't spread that way. The Muslims was involved in wars in the beginning, for sure. No problem. In the beginning, they were involved in wars because people didn't like the growth of Islam, and so they attacked the Muslims, and sometimes the Muslim had to attack other places. This is the early years. This is what happened. But we don't find people having Muslim crusades to the Holy Land and to kill millions of people. There's no record books that say when the Muslims came and invaded that the blood was up to their knees when they went into those lands, like it's recorded about Christian crusades, where the Christians themselves and the Jews themselves said that the blood was up to their knees of the people that were slaughtered. take a break. When we get back from the break, we'll continue, inshallah.
A friendly message by Dr. Zakir. Win over your enemy.
In this age of hatred and animosity, our all-loving Creator has prescribed the formula for winning over your enemy. In the glorious Quran, in Surah Fussilat, chapter 41, verse number 34. Nor can goodness and evil be equal. Repel evil with what is better. You will see that he with whom you had enmity will become your close friend. Do not defeat your enemies, but rather win them over. Win their hearts and win their minds.
Peace TV, the solution for humanity.
This is Asim Luqman Al-Hakim, and you're watching Peace TV, the solution for humanity.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الله لا إله إلا هو الحي القيوم لا تأخذه سنة ولا نوم.
A light from Allah in the darkness.
له ما في السماوات وما في الأرض من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه.
A guide from Allah in the confusion.
يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء.
A cure from Allah for every sickness.
وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يئوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم.
The Quran. Join me, Muhammad Timham, as we study the beautiful passages of the Quran and the great lessons that they contain in Lessons from the Quran.
Study about the glorious lessons that connect us to our Creator, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in Lessons from the Quran. Next on Peace TV.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We're talking about wars and barbaric beliefs that people say that Islam has. How Islam was spread by the sword. After 300 years after Christianity began, until this day, there has not been a 50-year period that Christians have not maimed, killed and massacred in the way of spreading their religion. There has not been a 50-year period where they have lived in peace with anybody. From the time that they started, when Christianity was inaugurated, 350 years, till now, there hasn't been a 50-year period where they haven't killed and maimed in the name of Christianity. In the earlier stages of Christianity, they massacred thousands, actually millions of people. If you want to look, there is a very good website for you to go to. It's not written by Muslims. In fact, it's owned by Christians. It's called War Maps. WARMAPS. Warmaps.com. Warmaps.com tells you about the Second World War, talks about the First World War, all the Korean War, everything. Type in there, War Maps Christian Wars. And it gives you a visual representation, a graphic, of how the wars were fought over the years. When you look at it, you go, my goodness. People say Islam was spread by the sword. Type in Islam wars and watch the presentation. It's about 13 seconds long. The Christian war goes on for about 10 minutes. It just goes on and on and on and on and on and on. Massacre after massacre after massacre after massacre after massacre. of Christians killing Christians, Christians killing Jews, Christians killing Hindus, Christians killing Muslims, Christians killing everything you can imagine that walked. And yet they accuse Islam. Why do they do that? Why do they say Islam was spread by the sword? Because if you point your finger there, they're not looking at you. And so you keep pointing. Look what they're doing there. And we all look there, and they continue killing people. This is what happens. This is the oldest trick in the book. You know, when your kids are doing something wrong, they'll split on the other child. Maybe if you've got 3 sons or 3 daughters or 2 sons and a daughter, matter, 2 of them will turn against one. They'll say, he did it. Meantime, they were involved in whatever was happening. You'll find that it was a collective thing that happened. Kids are like this. They like doing that. Turn on each other very quickly. We had this one kid that was in school with us. I remember him. He's become famous because everywhere I go, I talk about this kid. And he was one of those tattletales, you know, always told on what you did to everybody else. And one day we were brought to the office. It was quite regular. I was always in the principal's office for something I did wrong. I wasn't the best, well-behaved child in school. I was the mischievous, naughty kid. You could probably guess that already. And one day we went there. We all agreed, don't tell them what we actually did. Because they wanted to know why we hadn't come on a Saturday to an event that took place at the school sports event. And none of us came, like about 6 or 7 of us didn't go. But we unfortunately had this one kid in the group. He was not there for another reason. And so when we all stood in the front of the office, we all had the same story. And what did he say? They were not there because they were at the swimming pool the whole weekend instead of being at thing. And so he split on us. He told on us. So we all got caned. You know what happened? When we left that office, he got his own version of a caning. That's what happens when eventually your story will get caught in your story. And this is what happened in history. Is that people keep claiming Islam was spread by the sword, Islam was spread by the sword, Islam was spread by the sword. And people started investigating this. And when you'll find now the internet is filled with people giving different reports on how Christianity was spread by the sword. So those people went, let's have a look if this is true. And they found this is nonsense. Yes, we're not denying that there was bloodshed. We're not denying that Muslims, to defend territories, we're not denying that they had to be involved in wars. But it stopped early on. It didn't continue. There was no need for people to fight wars. And this is not the way they propagated Islam anyway. This was war, not propagation. This is not like kill in the name of Islam. This is what was happening. They were fighting wars. Like any country will have a war. And any country has the right to defend themselves or to go to war for whatever reason. It wasn't to defend or to spread the message of Islam. It was a separate issue. And there are many, many stories that are given, even in the combat, in the middle of combat, where somebody was about to kill someone and didn't kill them because they either converted or they made a suggestion that they wanted to convert. Even if it was a lie, they had to stop. They weren't allowed to kill them. And the rules and the regulations that Muslims are bound by in war are unbelievable. Yet Muslims obey this barbaric religion, supposedly, follows rules of not destroying your land, not destroying the income of the families, that the people that they are fighting against, not disturbing the nature or the environment, not making it impossible so that when you finish fighting the war that those people can continue living, like destroying their houses or destroying their crops. There's no religion, no belief system, no political system in the world that has such systems in place. In fact, most of them have what they call scorched earth policy. If you can't beat them, destroy their land. If you want to cripple them, destroy their crops. It's part of the principles that are practiced still to this very day by most governments in the world. And Islam prevents that from happening. So if you think Islam is barbaric, if you think Islam was spread by the sword, you just need to do a little bit more homework. You need to have a look a little bit more about what Islam actually teaches. How the Sharia protects every human being. How it is of benefit, not a hindrance. Do you have any questions you'd like to ask on this point before we move forward? I know you were taking lots of notes, so you can.
Sheikh, I just have a small comment. I think it's for the first time in the history of conquest that the conquerors accepted the religion of the conquered. When you look at the barbarians, the Genghis Khan people that came from Central Asia, and when they attacked Baghdad, at the time they accepted the religion which was Islam. So this is something very extraordinary which never happened in the history.
One of the interesting points to understand is that if you make people convert and you say you attack their country and you force them to convert, the minute you leave or lose power or they become independent, what will they do? They will simply go back to the religion that they had before. We don't find that in Islam. Of those countries that were involved in wars against Islam, they accepted Islam not because of war. They accepted Islam because it made sense to them. Lots of countries, many countries, not just one, often we use just one example. Many countries were never ever involved in any type of conflict, any type of struggle, any type of militancy between Muslims and their country, and yet they became predominantly Muslim countries. Without a single shot being fired, without a single negotiation taking place between political forces, they simply found the beauty of Islam acceptable to them. Most of Africa, in fact, almost all of Africa is Muslim. But there was hardly, in fact, the invading forces came from Christianity. The invading forces were from Portugal. The invading forces were from Britain, Holland, Portugal, but not from Muslim invaders. They simply moved down and were tradesmen. They were coming down with universities and colleges and mining techniques in our minds. And this is because we have been fed this inaccurate information by the West again, I'm talking about my culture, Europeans, that Africa was this primitive country, they were walking around as sheep herders, they had no intelligence. It's the exact opposite. When Europe was walking around sheep herders with barely knowing how to put clothes on themselves, Africa had universities, had learned to mine gold and silver and fashion gold and silver. They were teaching writing and reading skills. They had laboratories and were studying the sciences and the maths and were studying astrology and astronomy. The leading intellectuals of the day, they didn't even know how to shoot a weapon or how to fashion a weapon properly. They had left that archaic time long time ago, while Europe was still trying to figure out how to make gunpowder. And unfortunately, when they learned to make gunpowder, that was the end of everything. Because they came to Africa. And while Africa was teaching universities and colleges and medicine and the sciences, they were undefendable. And so they were unable to defend themselves against the colonists. That's the true story of what happened. Not the story that you read about these primitives. They were very, very smart. And how did they get smart? It was Islam that came through. That's why you still find to this day, even after all that colonization, after all that forced conversions that were taking place, you convert and your kids can get an education. You convert and we'll give you food. You convert and we'll allow you to live in this country and work for us as slaves. They still didn't. They remained Muslims. Even when they were forced, they refused. So if you want to see the real story of Africa, again, do the research. Don't just believe the story that you are told. Maybe we should take the world map, and I encourage everyone I know to do this. Take your world map and turn it upside down. Take your world map and flip it the other way around. Put Europe on the bottom for a change. Forget that they were not the dominant force. They did not dominate the world until recently. Before that, it was Asia, India, Africa. They were the dominant forces throughout the world. They were the intellectuals of the day. Europe was the last one to come along. They were the last developing culture or nation in the world. But the map has been flipped the other way around today. And so we got this inferiority complex. The world has got an inferiority complex, thinking that the Europeans did everything and everyone else in the world was primitive. That's not true. Look at ancient China, India, Pakistan, modern Pakistan. Look at all those, how intelligent, how advanced they were. But they didn't have weapons. Well, they did have weapons, but they didn't use them in the way they were used when people figured out what gunpowder could actually do. So we must never have this inferiority complex. If you're in Africa, if you're in India, if you're in what is classified as supposedly third world countries, you're not a third world country. You're a first world country. You're a proud country. You're a proud nation. Don't ever let anybody tell you otherwise. Well, that's all the time we have for today's program, and I ask that you join us again next time. So from me, Areeb, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.